Night here in Freeland, it was prom night, and I had to work, but I was able to see Ashley off, her beautiful dress, see some peers. I got to run into some folks from church out at Dow Gardens as we were all enjoying our family, taking pictures. And so I got home Saturday morning, and I asked my wife, how did prom go? And we had some friends, we allowed our daughter to have some friends over. They didn't do the all-night prom party, but some came to our house. So she said it was great. Ashley seemed to have a good time. All of that was good. And then she said, and the police showed up at the house at 3 in the morning. I'm like, what do you mean? And she proceeded to tell me that the police showed up because somebody called to report that there was an underage party going on and parents were serving alcohol. So they had a conversation, and the officer left. That's a lot of directions we could go with that story. And that is the case oftentimes with our life. But the critical part is to know no matter what a story is, no matter who and what we are often invited to go beyond what we initially think and ask some more questions and see some more things from different directions. Listen, I know initially that was a shock. I'm just glad I came home and they didn't arrest my wife. Because, you know, she's got warrants out for her. Well, that was in Ohio. They don't know about it. We're safe. I find that Jesus' invitation of growth in our two stories happens in three very distinct and different ways. And I think God is still in the business of figuring out what's on our mind and then inviting us to grow and consider something differently. We are who we are. We've become who we are for a reason, and we all have skills, we have habits. And one of the great ways to learn to serve the church and our families is just to recognize who and what we are. And then to acknowledge that God comes into who and what we are and invites us to pause and grow. Now, if you have a strong personality or some super strong qualities, it may take a little bit more to get your attention or awareness. If you are more subtle and quiet, God may be able to speak to you quietly and redirect or give direction. So I think God oftentimes proportionally speaks to us in the way that we need to listen based on who we are. Let's take Saul, for example. Saul is a tremendous go-getter. He makes things happen. He gets things done. He is presently in the business of hunting down people who are following Jesus to capture them and get them to Jerusalem to try to snuff out this new religion, the way it was called. He was highly effective, strong personality. He knew what he believed, and he did not believe these guys following Jesus, and he was using the rules and the mechanisms and everything to go and get them. This was unacceptable to Jesus. And so what happens is Paul is blinded on the road to Damascus. He hears the voice of Jesus, and what he hears is, "Why are you persecuting me?" And he becomes blinded. I think God still tries to get people's attention, especially those who are hunting down and hating on the church, or who are wrongfully doing things to others. Listen, if you got a strong personality type like me in some areas, heads up. God still uses dynamite to have a discussion. A huge hunk of dynamite is lobbed into Paul's path, Saul's path. The flash, the brightness, the blindness. He is now in darkness. His life is altered, and things are going to change, we hope. But if you are someone who has great strength and great opinions, just heads up, caution. Sometimes the way our attention is garnished is in a huge dynamite flash. Peter, on the other hand, a faithful follower of Jesus, he's at the shore. He is celebrating Jesus. Jesus wants to have a conversation with him after they shared a meal. But Jesus repeats himself 3 times to Peter. Peter is having what I want to say is a discussion with Jesus. Peter's already devoted and served Jesus. Peter has denied Jesus 3 times, has felt pretty bad about it, and now, did you catch that? 3 times, Jesus asks him, do you love me? Denied 3 times. He's being asked 3 times, do you love me? I think God is still in the business of figuring out how to equate and equalize our mistakes in our past with what God wants us to do in the future by repetitively talking to us on the same issue over and over again. And if you're a deep feeler, perhaps it's going to hurt as Jesus keeps on working the conversation with us to figure out, is our heart ready to hear what needs to be said? I find that a dear discussion going on. There's also another character who just simply gets direction. It's the story from Acts. It's Ananias. He's the follower of Jesus who's in a different city. And Jesus says to him, listen, Ananias, I've blinded this guy Paul. He's in this city. I want you to go find him, and I want you to talk to him on my behalf. And Ananias is given these directions, but he's afraid. He's like, I heard of his reputation. I know what he does. I don't want to do it. But in the discussion, he gets direction, and he follows direction. I think God is still in the business of giving us direction as well. The danger I am approaching with all of you is I don't want to say God causes misery and pain and suffering simply so that we follow God's will and ways. Saul had already decided to persecute Christians. God is trying to get his attention out of that. I just want to be careful on this issue. It's very dangerous. But I do want to say, in the midst of whatever is a flash, bang, and blindness, God is present there somewhere. The question is, are we ready to hear? In the midst of our own successful life and skills that we have following Jesus, God is still in the business of wanting to talk to us and touch our hearts and give us new insight. And God is certainly still in need of a lot of people who are sitting around looking for some direction to accomplish what God would have accomplished in the world by asking you to do something. God is still using dynamite, having discussion, and giving directions for all of us. The question is, how do we hear and understand that? And what do we know about ourselves in the way we interact with God? Last week, I spent 45 minutes on this test called the Clifton Strength Finder. It's a research tool, psychological test developed through Gallup poll. It's a very extensive, 135 questions. And at the end of the testing, it spits out to you your 5 greatest strengths. And so once you know what your strengths are, this book suggests that you should live life in your strengths and go with your strengths. This book suggests that one of the great lies that our world tells us is you can be anything you want to be, and that is simply not true. If you do not have the skills for some things, you cannot do them. It doesn't mean you can't try to learn and overcome. That's not what it's saying. But this book says because we are constantly telling others what they do wrong and their weaknesses, we often ignore their strengths. I'll tell you this from a personal perspective. If I focus on what I've done wrong or what I've missed or what I've forgotten or where my plans were poorly done, I'm saddened, I'm depressed, I'm less effective. If I focus on the amazing ways God works through me and around me, through my skills and what God has gifted me with, I am ready to serve the Lord and keep going and fighting. But our culture doesn't always honor what our strengths are. My number one strength, as this book indicated, is that I have a natural ability to walk into a situation, discern, see what's going on, and get action started almost intuitively. And it's almost always the right direction. There are very few people who are comfortable to show up in the middle of a mess, do an assessment, and take direction. I can do that. I don't know why. You watch me do it every single Sunday. Every time I pull something out of that bag, you watch it happen, live, real time. Take a look, make connections, make a story, and make it happen. That's an example of that happening. I know there are some people, if I said you're on for the children's sermon next week, I could give them the object, they could have it for 1 week, and at the end of 1 week they'd say, I got nothing, can't do it. It's not right or wrong. It's just a skill set. Saul has great skills. He's just killing Christians with them. Redirected, reshaped by God, Saul becomes Paul, the greatest missionary our church has. That's awesome. When we know what our skills are and we go with them and we bring them to God, it is amazing what can happen. But we also need to be aware that our skill set, although natural to us, is not natural to others. And so, there's a shadow side to your own skill set. For example, the shadow side to the skill I just shared with you, the ability to see, assess, and make something happen immediately. The shadow side is for someone who is methodical, meticulous, and needs discussion, and needs a series of rubrics and rules. They will see and experience my action as careless, irresponsible, and not caring. Their skill is different. Their natural skill. We need each other. But sinfulness enters the world if we assume that our skill is the one and only best skill, and we are not aware of how that can fall upon others. When we bring our skills to God, amazing things happen. Back to the seashore and where food is being prepared. I wonder what happened to all the fish that they caught in that net. You see, it says they went ashore and they saw a fire, and on the fire was fish and bread. Jesus already had all that was needed to feed them. And so I wonder what happened to all those fish they just caught. And Jesus said, bring the fish to me. I wonder why. The text says there was already fish ready to feed. You see, I don't think God is fully reliant on our skills and abilities and gifts to share grace in the world. The resurrection has happened. The tomb is empty. Christ has risen from the dead. Grace is extended. All that can feed those who are truly broken and in need of God's love, God has and has functioned through Christ to deliver. However, as the church, we are certainly invited to gather our gifts at the direction of Jesus and bring them to the meal, that perhaps we can have a conversation how those gifts can be best used to feed the world, to feed and care for others. I love this text only because I just heard it today. I just heard today there was already fish and bread on the fire. That which was brought wasn't what was fed to those who followed Jesus, in my opinion. Back to my story of the police officers yet again at the Schmidt residence. We turned our suspicion and negativity into gratitude. And the bottom line was, nothing was wrong anyways. Everything was okay. If we take what it is going on in our lives and we spin it in a negative way, it can be bitter. If we spin it or think about it in the most positive way, it becomes better. The same is true of the gifts and the skills that we have and bring to Jesus. Jesus will feed us all that we need for life. But what we do is we bring what we have, our gifts and skills, and bring them to Jesus so that we may grow in our greatness and be aware of, even in our greatness, that can seem intrusive and offensive to others. And when we start doing that, guess what we gain the ability to do? We gain the ability to look at the person who's opposite of us, that methodical, slow person who wants to be cautious and have a conversation. I can look at them and appreciate them for their gifts and not say, for crying out loud, why are you frustrating me to no end? Let's do it already. Two-way street through the awareness of God's love and grace for us. But we have to have the willingness to bring what we have to be fed at the fire with Jesus, that we may get this ability. It's a gift. I pray you grow in this gift as we serve our community as a church. Amen. I invite you to rise as we sing